Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Deepa Parekh. We are joining once again for the YouTube channel Wagner on Ethics and Leadership series. Dr. Wagner has served as a full-time professor of philosophy and logic with the College of Human Sciences and Humanities at the University of Houston Clear Lake. He's also as a professor of STEM education with the College of Education at the University of Clear Lake. He was a former vice president of Association of Philosophers in Education, former executive secretary of the Philosophy of Education Society, and number of years ago, he worked with Professor Patrick Suppes on the computer-assisted logic program for undergrad students at the Stanford University. We are discussing topics in one of his books, Personalities of Mathematics. This is part 3. Please do check out part 1 and 2 videos. We will have the links in the description box. Thank you for being here, and we're going to go ahead and start. Dr. Paul Wagner, how are you today, sir?
I'm just fine, doctor. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. So, jumping right in, from the last two discussions and many before, you mentioned math as a wilderness, explored a bit by those good in math and loved as a lifetime love for the heroes of math, which you discussed in the last part two. What do you mean when you talk about math as exploring wilderness, and how can education lead students into uncharted areas of math's wilderness?
Well, I think that one of the things that that I showed you all last time, and I'll at least show you the book again. One of the things that's interesting about this book by Princeton University Press, and we've got the link on it, they showed the offices of major mathematicians around the world. People who aren't in math may think to themselves that, well, mathematicians today are in front of the computer all the time and doing their work there, and not those who are involved in pure mathematics. I want to tell you a couple of stories about what counts as pure mathematics in the minds of pure mathematicians. At the turn of the previous century, there was a very famous mathematician by the name of G.H. Hardy. He was right up there in the world with Lord Bertrand Russell and Littlefield and the biggest names in math of all. G.H. Hardy had a student who the guy's name was Norbert Wiener, and Wiener had disappointed his father by not going to Harvard and had to go across the river to MIT to get his PhD. And he got his PhD in mathematics, and this is back during World War II. Norbert Wiener developed something called cybernetics, which has nothing to do with pop psychology, psychocybernetics. It's cybernetics of using feedback loops to readjust the performance of some sort of machine. And Norbert Wiener used the mathematics of feedback loops, which he created, to help us recalibrate anti-aircraft guns so that when they shot at Nazi airplanes, combat planes, and missed, they would immediately readjust, and the next 2 or 3 rounds go right through those airplanes. Wiener had become very, very famous as a mathematician. And so at one point, a group of journalists surrounded G.H. Hardy at Cambridge, and they said, "What do you think about your young protege?" Now, Wiener had gotten his PhD in math at MIT, but then he went over as a postdoctoral fellow to work under Hardy at Cambridge. And when they asked Hardy, "What do you think about your protege?" The mathematician Norbert Wiener, he paused. And he said, "Norbert Wiener is no mathematician." Surprising all the journalists present. They said he's done all sorts of mathematics, and his mathematics in helping anti-aircraft guns find the targets themselves after shooting the first few rounds at those Nazi airplanes. That was a tremendous boon to the war effort. And Hardy responded and said, he's no mathematician because he tries to apply it. Now, what he meant by that wasn't just a bit of arrogance, and of course he was being a bit arrogant, and he was serious too. For him, the true mathematician is wandering into territories that few people have ever imagined. The applied mathematician, such as we find in engineering and accounting and so many other fields, do important work, but they're doing important work from Hardy's point of view as an accountant or as an engineer or as some kind of a applied scientist. But the true mathematician is wandering, as it were, into a wilderness you've never been in before. And there's a couple of television shows on in recent years about discoveries in different parts of the world underneath Aztec temples or Inca temples in South America and Mexico and temples over in India and Pakistan. And there's so much we've discovered about cultures that we didn't even know existed. And they seem to have had a lot of skills at applying mathematical intuitions. But as we discover these things, we're in awe. Well, that's kind of like the mood that a pure mathematician is in when he discovers a whole new area of mathematics. Norbert Wiener was certainly a genius, but he applied his mathematics, and we're glad he did. But as G.H. Hardy said, G.H. Hardy spent his lifetime trying to explore areas of mathematics that no one could ever imagine existed. And then discovering that they do, and all sorts of puzzles come out that are rather interesting. Irrational numbers, for example, are those fractions that we find, for example, in between any two whole numbers. So between 1 and 2, they discovered there's an infinite number of irrational numbers between any two whole numbers. That's amazing. You can go back to the ancient Greeks, and Zeno loved paradoxes. And one of the things that paradoxes in math showed us was that there is a realm of intellectual speculation that no observation can help us through. And one of those examples was the tortoise and the hare. The great athlete Achilles starts off with, say, a 10-yard head start on the tortoise starts off with a 10-yard head start on Achilles, and they're going to have say, 100-yard race. And after just a step or two, the question that Zeno asks is, now the tortoise has moved forward a bit, Achilles has moved forward, and it's been in real time. But now what's the distance between Achilles and the tortoise? And whatever that distance is, Achilles has to cross half of that territory in real time, again, if he's ever going to catch the tortoise. But whatever that distance is, the tortoise is going to advance it as he takes another slow, lumbering step. And so Achilles, whatever he does, he's still got to go across half the distance to catch up to the tortoise in real time. And so Zeno thinks he's shown that the great Achilles, the athlete, will never be able to catch the tortoise because he's always got to cross half the distance in real time, and we can cut that distance in half an infinite number of times. He also gave us the example of the marksman shooting an arrow at a target 50 yards away or whatever. And that arrow, once it's released from the bow, has to go half the distance in real time. And to get there, it has to go half that distance in real time. And to go there, it has to go half that distance in real time. And on, an infinite number of times. There's no line so short that it can't be bisected again. Between any 2 points, as long as they're not the same point, there is a distance between them. And so that distance can always be cut in half again. an infinite number of times. This is mind-boggling, but it's the kind of thing that a pure mathematician thinks about. And it's not the kind of thing that's going to help us bake bread, make rocket ships, or thermonuclear weapons, or new computers, but it's the kind of thing that the superheroes of mathematics think about. And as they resolve those things, they leave their resolutions in the past for the applied mathematicians to come along and put them to work somehow, while the pure mathematician wanders ever further into the wilderness looking for other problems that seem insurmountable. But that's the sort of thing they enjoy. That's what drives them further.
Wow, that's a good way to differentiate the love of math and being good at math.
Mm-hmm.
So, another concept that you talk about is student building. In fact, I think you talked about student building in two of your previous books. The first one was Thinking Ahead, which we have done a video on. And then the second book was Education for Knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please elaborate on the concept of student building?
I would love to. I think it's a uh, really insightful idea uh, because when we talk about students as though there's something we need to teach, it's as though we're forming them. And I don't believe that's what good teachers should see themselves as doing. I think evolution took care of us being naturally curious. I think evolution took care of us wanting to learn more and more. And I think when we start taking over from evolution as the child comes into some kind of schooling arrangement, that we ought to see ourselves not as teaching the child, um, but we're there wholly to assist in their learning. And the only way we can do that is, I think, as the psychologist Jerome Bruner said a long time ago, and other people have repeated it since then, uh, is by role modeling for the students what it means to be a student. Any teacher that walks into the classroom thinking, I'm the teacher, I'm on this side of the desk, the students are on that side of the desk, and I do things to them, can't be a very effective teacher. Effective teachers come into the classroom full of excitement with the idea that this is another opportunity for me to learn. Because who knows what question a student may ask me that I can't answer. And I don't even know at the moment where I might go for that answer. So the students pointed away to a new direction in the mathematical wilderness. So enthusiastically, I can travel down that path day after day. Who knows how many days, weeks, months, or years it may take me to figure out that new patch of wilderness a student pointed me toward. And not just in math, but I think in all the subjects we teach, our attitudes should always be we're student building. And we come into the classroom as just the most advanced student in the classroom, not as the boss, not as there to load stuff down upon the shoulders of those who are with us. They're just more innocent in their investigations than are we, the teachers. But if we don't show them that we are students every bit as much as they are, we've just traveled a little further, then we're not helping them build a life of learning. We aren't building students. And I think that's what schools ought to be for, uh, to help build students. If students ever think they're done being built as students, their education has failed them and their education has stopped. Education should never stop, and student building should never stop.
That's profound, and that is so applicable to many of the leaders today in the workforce. Dr. Wagner, in all your books, you talk about the search for truth as an ideal, and then truth securing the highest of intellectual practices. Are there truths of math that we can grasp and not just approximate? And then we use probability to help us do statistics in the sciences, and thereby help us approximate the ideal. But are there actual truths in math that we can grasp?
Well, let me kind of start with toward the end of your question and then move toward the beginning. Um, Math, through the use of statistical tools and so on, is really an area. Statistics is an area of philosophy. Actually, it's an area of philosophy called inductive logic. And there's so much debate going on, philosophical debate on what are the most appropriate statistical tools to use in this science as opposed to that science today. In general, there are what might be called the statistics wars going on right now, and that's between frequency theorists such as Sir Ronald Fisher, a great name in statistics, and someone like uh, Thomas Bayes, or what we call Bayesian statistics. And it's all about how do we improve our approximations using the tools of probability. Probability is the area of math. Statistics is the area of philosophy, where we take what they have in math and we try to figure out how it might apply to this or that science. PhDs in the various sciences, ranging from psychology to engineering to physics and so on, are essentially doing philosophy when they construct arguments or practices using statistical tools, that is to say, applying from math probability to certain data to somehow extend their knowledge, not of math, but to extend their knowledge of whatever it is they're studying. The dark matter in the universe, the ability of uh, uh, the brain to route different types of messages to different areas of the brain. Um, but all those attempts to use math to somehow secure a better grip on the subject matter being studied and not math itself is all an effort of those scientists to do philosophy in their respective areas. And after all, we should keep in mind that the PhD is a doctor of philosophy. That's what PhD means, is a doctor of philosophy. And so they're doing that to say we're trying to learn more about this area of subject matter. They're not trying to learn more about math. A mathematician doing pure probability, like the Fibonacci, I'm sorry, like the Bernoullis or like Pascal or Fermat, those folks are all trying to extend knowledge of pure probability in math itself. Now, once we go back to extending knowledge in pure math, it's really interesting some of the things that we find. Uh, Plato and anybody who is looking for pure truth and pure math is likely to be described as a Platonist. Plato, but more famously Aristotle, described truth as this: truth is what it is, and what is not is not. So there you have truth.
Say that
Um,
one more time. Say that one more time.
Truth is what is, and is not what is not. And so it's blunt, it's simple, but it also takes our breath away because we're still floundering about saying, okay, for example, in math, so what are the limits of truth? And can we ever know those limits? And my thoughts are, I don't think we can ever know those limits. I think that's why it seems to me to be a wilderness um, that we make inroads on, but we don't drive super highways right through the middle of the wilderness of math. We still slog along, pushing our way further and further. There are people like the great physicist Stephen Hawking, who uh, at one point had talked about a singularity. Well, he and his colleague and then competitor for a while, Roger Penrose, both tried to reverse engineer the mathematics of the Big Bang, and they got to a place that was a mathematical singularity. The mathematical singularity has no weight, it has no height, it has no width, it has no length. But Penrose and Hawking wanted to say all the information that built all the universe is in that singularity. Now, in the case of Hawking, he became disturbed by many theologically motivated scholars who then wanted to say Hawking has given us great grounds for believing in a God. And Hawking didn't believe in a God, and so he wanted to change his commitment to a mathematical singularity, and he started developing something called a boundaryless universe in the last 10 years of his life. But this idea of looking for these truths of what is, and what is not, and really trying to penetrate beyond our normal reach of things, is just like what Plato predicted we were going to do as long as we did math. He drew our attention to well, he talked about a demiurge, but that's where the highest of all forms exist. Right below the demiurge is where we find all the perfect geometric forms, like triangles and circles and lines and squares, and uh, we can have all sorts of rules about those geometric objects. For example, a circle has 360 degrees within it. But the point would be no circle that's ever been realized on Earth or in space is so perfect. It only participates in the perfection of the ideal circles that exist in this non-material world somewhere. And it's pretty fascinating, but it's Plato's way of saying the only way we would know about the perfection of these different geometric objects is if we could imagine their being, their existing in some way that our theories could hold up. Now, of course, you can imagine lots of people say, well, where is this? And he says, well, it's somewhere out there where our mind reaches, and he won't go any further than that. I don't know how he could. You can read physicists like David Deutsch, who's alive today, and the more you read Deutsch, the more you think he's saying something Platonic about math and physics. But then he makes it perfectly clear toward the end of his writings, no, I'm not. But it sure sounded like he was going in that direction when he does much of his earlier writing. One of the things I like doing with students who I like seeing them brought into a Platonic view of the world where there are ideal circles and ideal triangles and so on. But I also like confusing them with a real world contact that troubles them. This is student building again. So I have done this with honors students in high school, from high schools that I worked with. Uh, I'd ask them, how many degrees are there in a triangle? And they would say, oh, there's 180 degrees. And I'd bring in a basketball that I'd cut in half. And on the outside of the basketball, I'd have them take their straight edge, draw a triangle on it. Well, the triangle is convex. You know, it bulges out on all three sides. And I say, now, tell me how many degrees are within that. Get out your little measurement things there. And, of course, all triangles built on the outside of a basketball will have greater than 180 degrees in them. Well, how can that be? You took your straight edge and you made a triangle, but it was on a curved surface. Ah, you mean like Emmy Noether and David Hilbert and Albert Einstein considered when they were working on gravity and on a principle of invariance. Yeah, like that. Let's take that half of basketball and turn it over. Now take your straight edge and draw a triangle inside that basketball. And of course, each of the sides are now convex. So on space that's curved in convex fashion, all triangles are less than 180 degrees. So we have Einstein telling us there are no straight lines in the real universe because wherever gravity affects what is there, the gravity curves space. Any 2 points that do not share a common surface have a distance between them, and that distance can never be a straight line, no matter how tiny. It's always going to be a geodesic, meaning it's going to be bent in some way or another, however slightly. But gravity, if it's in real space, gravity is going to bend that straight line, that effort to have a straight line going from point A to point B. So we're back to student building again. We're also back to plundering our way through the wilderness of mathematics in the astonishment of what we find when we look for truths of mathematics. When we look for truths of the world, Aristotle's line works pretty well. Truth is what it is. It is not what it is not. Okay, I got that. But when we look for things in mathematics, how do I ever know that I've found something that is what it is or is not what it is not? There are some things I can't even imagine what are out there. I'm stuck in the wilderness. There's more wilderness in front of me. I don't know which direction to go, but I know since the wilderness is in front of me, there's more to learn. And that learning isn't going to be any sort of black and white recognition that something is as it is and is not as it is not. Now, there are some things in mathematics, of course, in pure mathematics that we know, and it is what it is. And that's things like the set of odd natural numbers has as many members as a set of natural numbers. You go, well, wait a minute. The set of odd natural numbers, you can always add two. In the set of natural numbers, you can always add one. Well, that's true. But you can always draw a line from any odd natural number to the next line on natural numbers. And so the number of members in each set, because each set is infinite in size. So the number of members in the odd natural number line is as big as a set of members in the natural number line. Both are infinite. There is no point where you can't keep on drawing an isomorphic uh, linkage between the next member on the odd natural number lines and the next member on natural number lines. Having said that, we also know, intuitively, odd natural numbers seem to, when we look at some we might put on a natural number line, they look like they fit inside that other set. So shouldn't the other set be bigger? Well, that led us to recognize that talking about the number of members in a set is different from talking about the size of the set. And so the size of the set of odd natural numbers and the set of natural numbers, um, each, the one set envelops the other set. The set of natural numbers envelops the set of odd natural numbers. So the set can be said to envelop the other set, but the number of members in each set still remains the same number of members. Each is infinite. But the one set can go inside the other set. And so we can say that the larger set that envelops the smaller set is a different type of set. Amazing things in math. And surely there's no other animal that's ever been able to contemplate that kind of stuff. Other animals have a sense of quantity. That I think I'm using up a lot of calories to try to chase down the wildebeest for dinner. Should I stop and wait for an easier kill? Or that's a set of quantity, a sense of quantity. But no other animal thinks about the kind of stuff we do when we push ourselves further and further into the mathematical wilderness. And if wanted to say that mathematicians are odd for being that way. Now they're also pretty human. One quick story I have to share with you is Pierre Fermat, who used to write to Pascal about probability quite a bit. They were both pure mathematicians, purely focused on probability. Fermat came up with a theorem, and he wrote that he had this theorem, and he wrote outside of the note page that he was writing on that he had a proof for it. Well, the next day, Fermat had an eye for ladies. Next day, he goes out and he gets in a sword fight over this lady that he had an eye for. And he was a much better mathematician than he was a fencer. And so he got killed in this fencing fight. And we never found his proof. But mathematicians wondered about, he said he had a proof for it. Well, it took approximately 350 years of mathematicians living and dying, maybe giving up their whole career to trying to replicate that alleged proof that Fermat said he came up with. And finally, in the 1990s, a Princeton mathematician by the name of Wiles came up with an enormously long proof, which immediately sent the mathematical community around the world to look for a flaw. That's part of what they do. That's the fun. And as of yet, no one's found a flaw in Wiles' proof. But think of that, 350 years, people haven't given up their whole life, their whole life's work looking for a theorem, a proof of Fermat's theorem, and never getting one, and dying. These are incredibly smart people, and that lure to solve that problem has got to be overwhelming. That's part of the world of real mathematics. It's an adventure.
Just while you're mentioning this, I remember a story that you in your ethics class about what 3 years ago. We had a discussion, and one of the topic there was, I think we had a long talk about we don't even know what we don't know. We don't
Yeah.
even know what we don't know.
It's interesting that you remember that phrase, because one of the things that used to dismay me was, oh heck, I can't. I think it was one of the Bushes were president at the time, but they had a Secretary of Defense called Donald Rumsfeld, and he said in an interview, "We don't even know what we don't know." I think he was talking something about a war in Afghanistan or whatever, and journalists made fun of that. That should not have been made fun of. That is an incredibly profound statement. We don't even know what we don't know. That was what Plato was trying to tell us in the allegory of the cave when he said, imagine people looking at a wall of a cave and there's a light behind them. And whenever they talk to a shadow, they hear a voice responding, although it's coming right next to them. But they're only seeing the shadow. And so they think that the world is made up of shadows, and those shadows can all talk because they hear voices when they talk to those shadows. And then Plato asks us, imagine one of them turned around and saw that there was a fire or the sun behind them, and that they were actually all talking to shadows, and then what was real was to their left and to their right. They didn't even know what they didn't know. And Plato uh, teases us by saying, how would they ever get the guy who turns around and sees what's real? How would he ever get the other people to turn around and believe him and turn around and look and see that what they were looking at all along had been false? They don't even know what they don't know. And the idea of changing their mind is incredible. We have all sorts of psychologists, philosophers, and others today trying to address that problem because of what happened on during COVID and all the nonsensical things that different groups were saying, and how angry people got at each other, and so little willingness to listen to real experts, but more eagerness to listen to the most recent, a podcast. And that was a shame. And it was a shame that we could have anticipated if we just read Plato and took him seriously.
Yeah, these discussions can go very deep and very long, but it's very interesting how everything can be interconnected, and these philosophies from ancient times are still applicable today in today's world, and I'm sure it will be applicable to the next generation and to next. Um, Coming back to the podcast, um, you have key ideas at the end of the chapter in this book. Um, they look like they could be very helpful to all types of teachers, not just math educators. Is that true?
Well, we think it is. Just to open up to a couple at random here. One of the things that we wrote in the end of the second chapter, we said apt teaching, good teaching, should lead students to a relatively well-defined sense of a subject matter's personality. The idea of each subject matter having a personality, I think, is grievously overlooked. If you fell in love with history, there's something about the study of history that turns you on. And if you fell in love with math, something about math turns you on. You're fascinated by it. And if you fell in love with biology, it's the same thing in each case. Good teachers find a way to exhibit some of the most alluring characteristics of what they teach, and they should role model to their students how much they love what they teach. I had a student one time, this was maybe 40 years ago. I've never forgotten this situation because it saddened me about teachers, about teaching. This fellow um, came up to me after class. I had said something in class as I was putting something on the board, and I knew I'd gotten something wrong mathematically. And I turned to the student and I said, called on him, and I said, I'm missing something here. Can you tell me what it is? Because I knew it was advanced enough that most of the other students, if they weren't math majors, weren't going to know. And he got embarrassed and he said, no. I figured out what I needed to put up there. That got taken care of. After class, he came up and he apologized to me. And I said, oh, you don't have to apologize to me. I should apologize to you because I couldn't figure out, my own problem I was putting up there. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot. And he said, well, no, I was embarrassed because, I couldn't answer it. And I said, well, the reason I called on you was because I thought you were a math major. And he said, I am. And I said, you're going to be a math teacher? And he said, yeah, but I don't like math. I said, then why are you going to be a math teacher? And he said, because, now this is, a long time ago, decades ago. He said, because the state of Florida at the time is giving a $3,000 bonus to anybody who is a math teacher who will move to Florida and take a job teaching math there. And I said, so you're going to get a degree in an area you don't even like to be able to get that $3,000 bonus? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, how are you doing in your math courses? And he said, I barely got a 2.2. He said, if it wasn't for my education courses, I wouldn't have a grade point high enough to graduate. He's going to go out and teach math. I don't believe you can teach something you don't love.
Yeah, I agree because it's then just what's given to you in a curriculum, and that's it. There is no chance for creativity. There is no option for innovating or personalizing that
Right.
teaching or the learning for the student.
What are the
So
nifty parts of math that make you go, oh my gosh? Because that's the kind of thing that creates excitement when you talk to the students about it. What are the nifty parts of history that make you want to go, oh my gosh, and did you know? That's what makes you excited about teaching history. And the same with any subject, teaching English and saying, look at how we can use language to create beauty. And oh wow. So I think that's exciting. Another one that just happens to be in this chapter: love. Love applauds mystery, and math reveals mystery and affection to those who learn to love it. You love math, math will return its love, and it will bring mystery, and love needs mystery. And math will bring plenty of mystery into your life, more to love, more to pursue. And that'd be the same for any subject matter. Another idea back in this chapter: beauty. Beauty is revealed in the range of number types and in its emerging functions and operations. Wow, I was wondering how one could ever figure that out. But you're right, if you use this thing called imaginary numbers, which a mathematician by the name of Euler, pronounced Euler, Euler came up with about 300 years, that will work. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
Another one, key ideas for teaching math, but it applies to others, as you've said. Wait, what? This is the wait, what principle?
Hmm.
Experiencing the personality of mathematics, or whatever subject you want to teach, involves an experiential feel for investigation into the mathematical wilderness. Some people are terrified to take a step toward that wilderness. Some people can't wait to get into it. Some people love to go to bed with problems of stepping forward into that wilderness and have trouble sleeping, trying to figure out how can I get into this. And yet they love it. And the next day they're going to go back to it and try to do that more. And finally, there is more to mathematical understanding than being good at calculation or even being very good at it. So 5 questions that if a teacher brings them into her spirit of role modeling and then teaching, role modeling and then teaching, role modeling and then teaching, she'll be a great teacher. If she tries to teach without having that spirit built into her for that subject matter, she will be a very ordinary person in that classroom.
Wow. So going in circles and circles, circles, it all comes back to love. Whether it's
Love.
loving a person, loving a subject, loving anything that breathes, loving something that doesn't breathe, but it brings it back to love. When you do it with love, you will see it grow.
All right. And 3 other questions I just flipped open to another chapter here. And we write that personality is found in every formal discipline. I mentioned that before. And I said all subject matters have individuating personalities, finding flavor in the hearts of some. So going and teaching math because you're going to get a $3,000 bonus, you'll never be a good teacher in math because you don't love it. And you can't role model what it is to love that subject. The same is true of mathematics. However, the search for the personality of math seems particularly obscure to many students in today's world of public education. And another one there, math is a language unto itself. It names things people may never experience with their senses. I have never experienced infinity, nor have you, nor has any listener. But I have no doubt that infinity exists because there's no way to doubt that one can always be added to whatever number you've gotten to. So we can understand the construction of infinity, and so in a sense that it must exist, but we can never wrap our mind around it. That is precious. If you're married to somebody that you're really in love with, it's not because you can fill out a list of qualities that they have and say, oh, there you got it. That's what makes me love you. Because that list then could be used to identify hundreds of people that you could be in love with. And surely that's not the case. So there's a certain savoir faire that a person has that makes you particularly attractive to them. and makes them attractive to you. It's the same with the subject matter. Math has a certain savoir-faire, and poetry, learning poetry, has a certain savoir-faire to it. And it's not as though there is a list of what those qualities are that one can just incorporate. One has to get to know the subject matter well enough and be in tune with it. And I don't know how that happens, but you got to be in tune with it so you fall in love with it. If you don't fall in love with your subject matter, teach something else. Whatever, don't get in front of a group of students and try to teach that subject matter, because you can't role model what it means to understand the personality of that subject matter, to be in love with that subject matter. That's what teaching is about. And we got another one here. Math is an essential tool. Well, that's certainly true. I mean, look at how many of our scientists depend upon, cleverness with math, being good or very good with math, and so that's important too. Um, well, I can go on to, you
Yeah,
know,
I was
yeah.
gonna say that we can go on and on, but thank you so much for your time once again, Dr. Wagner. Um, but given how lofty the thinking becomes when we talk about math, especially pure math, I have heard it said from Indian scholars that math opens something of the divine. You mentioned Ramanujan in earlier videos. Plato in ancient Greece thought math truth was exciting and pure, and the great logician of the last century, Kurt Gödel, worked on a proof that God exists.
Yes.
So here's the last question. Could math be the language of a creator more intelligent than us humans?
Well, there's a well-known mathematician who's alive right now in England, and I forget which university he's with. It might be Cambridge, but his name is John Lennox, and the more he studies math, the more that he thinks he gets a feel for there being a God. He's not the only one. The guy who had been head of Cavendish Laboratories at Cambridge, and that used to be the number one research laboratory in the world, Cavendish. And you were on your way to a Nobel in something sooner or later. He left Cavendish Lab to go take holy orders as an Anglican priest. Then he went back to doing high energy physics, and this is after he was now also a priest. He's written a whole series of books on mathematics and God. Um, there is a fellow by the name of Gerald Schroeder, a fellow with something like 300 articles to his credit. He's at Hebrew University in Israel, and Schroeder is a physicist, and he's written several books on uh, God and mathematics, and he thinks that that Genesis, the world being created in 7 days, got it perfectly right, and he uses physics to illustrate that. And he said, imagine, Einstein's already shown us if you took two twins, one set of twins, and they're at the same place. One of them goes in a rocket out into space, and then he comes back, what might be 10 years later, according to the twin that started here, that he'll literally be a different age than his twin, because the space travel itself causes all the differences imaginable in the world. And and so Schroeder would say the 7 days of creation, the first day could have been 10 billion years. And the second day, if you were that twin that got the start, wherever it was, the starting location, then the second day might have taken 10 billion years if you were out on the fringe coming back in. The third day might have taken 5 billion years, whatever. So, and he describes all that in one of his books. I can't remember which one it is, but he's a well-trained, competent physicist who thinks the more he studied, in his case, physics and math, the more he's convinced that there's grounds for concluding that there's a God. And Kurt Gödel, who is probably one of the two greatest logicians of the previous century. He constructed the incompleteness theorem, which is the hurdle that must be jumped if we're ever to have a complete AI. And Kurt Gödel finished his life by trying to construct a proof for God. And this is a guy that is, one of the two greatest logicians in a century, and particularly in the 20th century. We've been working on logic since back in the days of Plato and Aristotle. So 2,500 years passed, and this is the greatest guy gets to build on all this stuff before, and he's one of the two greatest for that century. He's got God built into it. Now the other one, who's W.V. Quine, he's an atheist. What can you make of that? You can make only this of that. Really smart people can't draw an airtight conclusion in either case. Both Gödel and Quine have to heed the words of Aristotle. It is what it is, and it is not what it is not. That's the truth.
One of my books that I was reading, there's a great deal of details given in the Vedas in India. And it talks about all the stuff, how many years, and you can calculate what it is, what is the year of Brahma and what is the year of Earth. It goes like really, really deep. Maybe one day we'll talk about Vedic studies here.
Okay.
But thank you so much for the time once again, and the insights, and always at least making me think deeper. And I'm sure other people that are listening, there will be a lot of people like me curious to know and hungry for more. So until next
Right.
time, thank you so much.
Okay.
Namaste. And
Namaste.
to the listeners, if you enjoy our content, please share and subscribe to the channel. Give us feedback if you would like us to elaborate in any of these topics or want to learn more. And do check out the books that Dr. Wagner has written, the articles. And if you have questions about any of those, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. This is Dr. Deepo Parekh. Yes.
I have one last thing I might share with you. Somebody contacted me about a week ago, and I've never seen or heard of this guy called Jordan Peterson, but he apparently has a lot of podcasts. And the person said, "You're just like Jordan Peterson." So I'm thinking that might be a compliment. He said it like a compliment, and apparently Jordan Peterson is this fellow who another professor who does a number of podcasts on things that are not run of the mill.
Yeah, and somebody reached out to me, one of the viewers, and they said, "Oh, how much do you guys charge for membership in this?" I want to just make it clear. This channel is not for monetary gain, not a dime. We are doing this to get people engaged in the great conversation of humankind. We want people to think, put away your Netflix, put away your screen, entertainment for another time, but to keep your brain going. This is brain food. So this channel is not for monetary gain. We ask you to subscribe because when we put out a video, you will know right away, and you can start thinking about the topics that we talk about. Or if you have any other topics, you can share with us. But as I think last 3 or 4 videos ago, Dr. Wagner had shared that his little friend in the back, it's a reminder. It's a reminder to not let your intellect die.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Dr. Wagner. Thank you, and thank you everyone for being with us and spending this time and listening to the talks that we have.
Thank you.